Aluminum shortage be damned. That's some good stuff. It'll be the death of me, but that's some good stuff. Welcome to another Dacetacular Mind. Don't mind me. I'm enjoying one of the few rare monster ultra red energy drinks that are out there today because of the aluminum shortage and the fact that Monster said, hey, we're going to keep just canning the awful kind. Forget about you who like the good kind. Don't fight me on it. Maybe we'll have a monster debate for one of our other BPP segments out there, but we're here to talk about what's going on inside my head. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I record 2 episodes at a time, so I have no idea what your feedback is on last week's episode, and I don't know if you returned to hear this week's episode. If you didn't, I get it. Also, if you didn't get to hear me saying I got it. So, yeah, let's just move on then. This week on the Dacetacular Mind, we're going to be talking about the Dace Man Show origins. Yeah, that thing I've been doing for almost 9 full years. June 23rd, 2021 will mark 9 full years of doing this gig as we embark into our 10th year. And it's intense. Super intense. And what does that mean? It became bigger than what it originally was. So I don't know if I'm going to sugarcoat it anymore, what the case may be, but I guess we might as well dive right into things. And you can't really know the story of the Dace Man Show without knowing the story of how I became the Dace Man. And that starts in Defford Township High School in 2006. Now in 2006, myself and my friend Victor Straub at the time took a class, and we were part of your morning announcements. So if you're listening to this and you were part of Defford Township High School if you were a student in 2006, you got to deal with my annoying ass every morning, over-the-top personality. And then the teacher there, Mr. McConnell. I know, because I'm old and my memory's fading, I've called him the professor from Harry Potter before. But he coined the Dace Man. Now, I'm going to just openly admit I didn't know who Andrew Dice Clay was. I didn't get the reference. I do now. Legally. But my morning broadcast partner and the straight man in the segments was Vic, a.k.a. Slick Vic. So it was Slick Vic and the Dace Man in the morning every other day. We're sorry. But we had fun with it. We had fun. So that was really the birth of the Dace Man and the morning announcements. And for those of you that did go to high school with me and I annoyed the shit out of you, I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry, because it sparked this wonderful adventure I've gone on to that put me in my 30s and still doing podcasting. Yay! I'm happy. I'm so happy. Just kidding. As a joke. I'm fine. He's fine. Just sip on your monster. That's some ASMR for you. Anyway, that's the origin of the Dace Man. So we did the morning announcements for the second half of the year, because I think it was a half a year type thing. And it was fun. I mean, I tried to give a pizzazz to it because news is boring. It was also the time where, Colbert Report was just taking off. The Daily Show was really getting its footing in. And news didn't have to be boring anymore. And I feel like I brought my spin of entertainment on it, and the Dace Man was born. That same year, and this hat tip goes to a friend of mine, Chris Bompadre, coined Dacetacular. So everything about me and the brand that I've built was never me. I just happen to have the last name. I don't even know how it happened, but we were in a physics class, we were talking, and I was like, I'm doing pretty spectacular to Mr. Bompadre, and his response was, well, I'm doing Dacetacular. And now we have a charity event with that word. And it's all over stuff. It's become a thing. So the Dace Man's origins was 2006, Defford Township High School. The Dace Man on the morning announcements, Dacetacular, given by Chris Bompadre. That's how it came to be, and it stuck. So after I graduated, I had a lot of time on my hands because I always performed in high school. I did the morning news announcements I ran around with a camera through the school, filming things here and there, filming my own projects for that class, as well as just for fun. If we actually capitalized on YouTube when we were doing those videos, this podcast would probably be listened to by way more people and cared about by way more people, because YouTube was actually just starting around then. We didn't have HD at the time we were starting. Okay, we had HD, but that was for like rich people. I still had like, you just reference it by Scrubs for me and the aspect ratio. I still had a tube TV, DVD player. That's why I have all these DVDs now. Yeah, that's how old I am to all you younger listeners. And that's not even that old. So, pipe the fuck down. Oh, God. It was like 15 years ago. Whew. Oh, God. I'm like, oh, God. We actually graduated like 15 years ago. It's horrible. Let's move on. So, after I got out of high school, I still had the itch to act and stuff like that. But not being in a high school, you don't get those type of opportunities facilitated to you as much. But I did have a camera. And I did go to a very good art school and then didn't do good things at that art school. I went down to Savannah, Georgia for about 9 months, and Savannah College of Art and Design. And it's no secret that I was kind of lonely down there. I didn't know many people. I went down with my girlfriend at the time and one of my friends. That one friend moved back during winter break to New Jersey. I mean, I would follow suit after the third trimester was done at Savannah College of Art and Design, but there was a lot of dead time. I will admit, my girlfriend at the time and the one friend, when they were there, they integrated themselves into the college system way better than I did. Anyone who knows me, worked, still in the automotive business, but down there, and when I would go to class. So I had very little free time, and when I did have free time, I found like this sweet spot of like, my girlfriend wasn't home, my friend wasn't home, I was by myself in the apartment. I had a camera and had the itch to entertain. At that point, in the fall of 2006, the 3 years prior, I was on the stage acting every afternoon, trying to prepare for a fall play. And then the year before that, I was doing the morning announcements. So I had a lot of exposure in playing characters, but that was gone. Especially the first trimester in Savannah College of Art and Design, because I went there on the idea that I was going to be a 3D animator and one day work for Pixar. Didn't pan out. Had fun with it. I really enjoyed doing it in the class that I had with Joe Lampone in Deptford Township High School and working the Maya program at the time. I thought it was great. Not a big fan of going to Savannah, Georgia and being told, hey, you're going to draw fruit and naked people for 3 years and then we'll teach you the computer stuff. To me, it was just like, oh, so you want my money when you just 1 year is actually going to give me the knowledge I need. College is a scam. As Rick says from Rick and Morty, school's for dumb people. Cheers. Anyway, and I apologize for drinking in this. I parched. I think I led in this episode that I do 2 episodes at a time because time is tight these days between streaming, doing the Dace Man Show, and my actual adult job that maybe one day I'll talk about this. Probably not. But that one's very stressful. But now I'm in Savannah, Georgia, by myself. I got some spare time, I have a camera, and I have ideas. So I start filming some weird stuff. Again, if I knew what I was doing, could have taken off, because YouTube wasn't really a thing. It was just in its infant stages, and if I had just posted it to YouTube instead of the platform Crackle, it would have taken off. And I brought you the Dace Man Show, and it was dumb. Like, dumb. And it was my poor attempt at comedy. Really, it was just the psycho rantings of a madman in Savannah, Georgia. A Jersey guy stuck in the South and just not adapting very well. So that was my first attempt at doing the Dace Man Show. And I want to say 9 episodes. I think it was 9. You can't find them anywhere. If you do find them somewhere, I'd love to see them. And then I'll ask you to immediately delete that file, because my vague memory of what I did was awful. It was one man, unproduced, hit and record, and just going. And I don't know what happened to those videos because Crackle turned into an actual streaming service and they got rid of my type of stuff. So fast forward to my failed experiment down in Savannah, Georgia, and trying to live in the South, which doesn't work and has deterred me from moving ever since. I'm home, and we come across a group that we start doing what's called uncensored comedy, and I will talk about that experience one day down the road on a podcast because it definitely warrants its own thing because we tried something for a year, and ultimately without that, it doesn't spark the projects that come after, including the third attempt at the Dace Man Show. But that really, when I got back from Savannah, a group of us met up and began doing that comedy troupe. And again, I'm not going to get too much detail because I do want to save that for an episode down the road because I think that's going to be fun. And maybe I can even bring some of those guys on to talk about our experience. But, sorry, COVID, not COVID, just kidding. But after that kind of dissolved, it was always there, never fully went away. There's still a flag down in the basement somewhere. But as that started losing some of its power, in 2009, back when yours truly started doing OTW, I had the desire again to be in front of the camera. Now, we'd filmed stuff with Uncensored Entertainment, never released any of it, never did anything with it. A lot of it was lost, unfortunately, which sucks, because some of it was awfully amazing. And by awfully, I mean it was awful and amazing at the same time. I wanted to produce something. So I remembered the idea I had in Savannah, being a lonely weirdo down there. Except now I was back in Jersey and I wasn't a lonely weirdo anymore. I was just a plain old weirdo. I said, hey, I'm going to do a Christmas special. The Dace Man Show Christmas special. And I did it live on Christmas Eve on a platform called Justin.tv. My, how things come full circle. So for those of you who don't know what Justin.tv is, it's Twitch. It's what Twitch was before Twitch. And I was on it. Again, somehow ahead of the curve, but not fast enough to make the curve before everybody else got around it. So like I was just kind of like coming around the curve, and then everybody else who's smarter and better at things than me went blowing by me. So I did this live special. My go-to move when it comes to any Christmas special is to play a Twisted Christmas by Twisted Sister because, you know, there's Christmas music and then there's Twisted Metal Twisted Christmas special. And I'm more twisted. So that's why I went with that. But in hindsight, copyright wasn't a thing back then. You know, nobody understood it. It would get annihilated today. So I did that. I did a whole little special. I built I used a desk that we had built for a sketch we were going to use in Uncensored, but used that for my thing and put stuff behind me and did the whole special live. Don't know if anyone watched it. Don't know if anybody remembers that I did it. I barely remember that I did it. I also remember having the short haircut, which means it was 2009 to 2010 when I was just going up onto the project for my work that would keep me in Canada for most of the time, and then ultimately take me away from this one-off that didn't become of anything. Because when I started traveling for that really killed a lot of momentum I had for anything. Not saying that it killed momentum for other people, because good things did come out of Uncensored. And again, we'll have a whole episode on it, because I think it's important to talk about. But one of the members of that was Tony Mango, who went and founded Fanboys Anonymous. I got to work with Fanboys in its early infancy. Tony had I'd already worked with Tony on stuff like doing for wrestling podcasts. I was part of his whole Smark Out Moment stuff in the very, very early stages. And it was nice. It was fun to, like, it was a different experience. And again, I'll have a whole episode on that, which I think would be great. But to give you a matter of perspective, in 2006, on stage, talent show, acting, and the news. The news and the talent show, I was focal point, front and center. The stage stuff, I did have a lead in my final year there, but I think it's because I had long hair and I kind of looked like Daniel Day-Lewis at the time, just like a younger version, just not good at the acting part. But I was also in other roles throughout the fall play. And ultimately, I looked a lot scruffier than the better actors of the year. Anyway, working with Tony and the Smark Out Moment podcast, Smack Talk, was interesting because Tony was the front man. It was Tony's project. Tony led the conversation. Tony was the front guy. I got to play, not color commentator, but more or less, I was a part of the party. I was an add-on. I was a guest. I was able to not have to know what's coming next and be part of the anarchy, which was fun. It was good to be like the weirdo and not always have to talk. That's one thing that the Dace Man Show will ultimately kick my ass on, is being the guy leading the conversation, because if you're the guy leading the conversation, you're not necessarily the guy that can make the joke. And that is painful for a guy that always wants to try to be the one who says the funniest thing. I know there's a lot of people I talk to that have that same problem. Because if you listen to a lot of the stuff we have done in the past 9 years, it's always the one person trying to one up the other. So when you're playing the straight man or the lead, or you're having a show called The Dace Man Show, you have to direct the conversation. And there will be years in the Dace Man Show when we talk about the 9-year run we're on that I don't lead the show, and those shows are awful. No other way to put it. So having Tony do that on Smack Talk was refreshing for me to actually play the chaotic character, or at least the guy that gets to add to what Tony's trying to say. But it gave you the itch to do your own thing again. Now, Tony, in creating Fanboys Anonymous, also worked with a gentleman named Mike Payton, who had, at the time, Mega Powers Radio. And that was a station for podcasts that was going to be on Blog Talk Radio. And that all came together. The reason it's called Mega Powers Radio, and we'll get into more detail because I do want to break down the Dace Man Show maybe year by year, or like section it off at some point. But it was a wrestling oriented podcast station. Like, all the stuff they did on there was very wrestling centric. And then there was me, the lunatic. But they started a collective which worked very well, and it's a shame because it was a very talented collective. And Mike and Tony gave me the opportunity to revive the Dace Man Show. The 9 episodes that were on Crackle, the 1 live special on Justin.tv, all dead forms of fucking media, and put it on Blog Talk. So just, instead of being a visual platform, as the other ones had been, moved to audio only. And I went, oh, cool. Which suited me better, because when you do visual stuff, you're stuck to a schedule where everybody has to be in the same location. And in 2009, 2010, I said, I'm going to join this project, not realizing that 11 years later, here we are in 2021, I'm still traveling. The day you're listening to this show, I will be on the road at some point today, heading to New York. If you don't listen to it on the Monday that it drops, I will be in New York, because I joined a project that makes me travel. And then the project never ended, and I'm going crazy. That's a different story for another day. I feel like a lot of these just lead into stories like, that's a story for another day. But the Dace Man Show, at this point, I hadn't done anything with it since 2009. 2009, I had done the live Justin.tv special that nobody saw, hopefully, because you guys would probably hold it against me. It was terrible quality. It was live. I remember it was live. It was our first live show that I did. Had a boombox next to me to run the Twisted Sister CD. But at this point, I hadn't done anything with that entity when this conversation began in almost 3 years. So I had a first run at it in 2006. 3 years later, in 2009, I did one live Christmas special and said, I'm going to take it off again, and we're going to rock and roll. 2010 rolls around. I'm now in Montreal working, so I can't do that, and that kind of ended. It ended my the only avenue I got to perform was on Smack Talk with Tony, because I was able to call in via Skype. I had all the tools to do remote connections, so I was able to do that. And so Mike Payton and Tony Mango came to me and kind of said, hey, how do you feel about doing your own show? And at the time, on a Wednesday blog. And I went, sure, because I have an ego. And I will absolutely do a show, because that to me sounds fun. I'd like to talk. I like to talk so much that, 9 years after that conversation, I'm doing my own show where I'm talking to myself. And maybe people are listening. We don't know. Pissing them off every other week. Reminiscing about myself every other week. Who knows what I'll talk about next week? I don't even know. Just talking to you today has triggered like so many other stories I could go into detail for, but they should be their own episode. So I said, yeah, we'll do this. I got the Wednesday night slot. So Monday night had the post-Raw show that they would do. I believe Friday was the Smack Talk show that would drop. Michael Burhan, another name that will come up in the origins of the Dace Man Show, he was doing a show called I Got Gameplay at the time, which was very video game centric, which ironically, the Dace Man Show would become very video game centric later on in its entity, around the 2015-16 year. And then I would be the Wednesday night slot, 8 p.m. Eastern, Blog Talk Radio, whatever I wanted to talk about. And I had segmented it up for the first show. I was going to do sports for 15, celeb for 15, gaming for 15, and then I think I even saved a slot for political for 15. And I remember the first episode, it's not really that long of an episode. I actually have the first episode still saved on my, at 2013, when this show eventually relaunched for the third and hopefully the final time, I started getting in my head like, hey, you need to start documenting this shit you do and keeping it, because it's going to be stuff you're going to want to go back to and listen to, or at least explain to in court, like, hey, you clipped only this portion, this is the whole show, go back and listen to the whole show. I'm always prepared. But episode 1, which was called The Resurrection, only ran 45 minutes. So I remember vividly the conversations we had. I remember who was on and everything. And I didn't know what I was going to do, to be honest with you. It caught a format at some point, to the point where I think like by episode 3, we were making an hour consistent. Well, actually, we started making an hour consistent once we got to the next episode. Episode 3, we started getting like, okay, here's some regulars. And by episode 11, we had the core people. But to lead up to this was just like, podcasting was new to me. I was always a guest on these other podcasts with Smack Talk or I Got Gameplay or the post-Raw show that they used to do. And it was always like, hey, we're going to do this. Would you like to join us? I didn't do anything. All I did was pretty much be on Skype at a certain time, and I was in. No rights, wrong, or indifferent about that. So now, coming off of years of doing my own show by myself, hitting the camera button myself, talking about nonsense without actually any planning, it was kind of like, okay, we got this. Let's do it. We got this. Right? We got this. We didn't have this. My first episode, I was supposed to be home. I remember this vividly because I was like, okay, you know what? I travel this week. June 23rd, I don't have to be anywhere. I'd like to be home for my first show just to feel the ropes, get a feel for it, rock and roll with my own equipment, and not rely on a hotel internet connection. That didn't happen. Something came up at work. I was forced to fly out to Oklahoma City for the week. I was at dinner with a bunch of coworkers. Mind you, an hour before, so I was in a different time zone. So I was an hour behind now. We're supposed to go 8 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday. I was in Central time zone. So it was 7 p.m. Central that we were going to go live. And we had just gotten to dinner at like 6 because it was a long work day. And at like 6:30, I was like, I got to go. I got a show to do. And I remember being like stared at because everybody knows the show now. So like here we are 375 episodes later on the Dace Man Show. It's easy to say, hey, I do this thing every week. It's fine. Sorry about that. COVID again. Just kidding. I don't have COVID. Sorry. It's not something to joke about. Now people are like, oh, it's weird when I'm not doing something online in 2021. But in 2013, it was odd that I slipped away from dinner to go back to my room in Oklahoma City, fire up the laptop, which, again, I used a work laptop, log into Blog Talk Radio, and we're firing on all cylinders. So the first episode it's weird, because the first episode, the only person that's on the show now from the first episode is yours truly. None of those guests stayed on. We had Dan Raup, who didn't make it far into the series. I don't think he wanted to do it as much. He's not a big talker. He's great at gaming, great at behind the scenes work. Didn't really want to be the Ed McMahon to my Johnny Carson. Mike Payton, who was for all intents and purposes, the boss at Mega Powers Radio. What I would call an A personality, because he hosted his own show. He knew how to host shows, but he was on here because he wanted to see the launch of the news show go well. And then Michael Burhan, who was the host of his own show, host of multiple shows, doing his own thing, and had way more experience with podcasts than I did. Him and I played off each other very well on Smack Talk when we did it with Tony, but he jumped on our show. And Michael Burhan would stay around for a while, and he's definitely one of our long tenured and fun guest co-hosts, or co-host for that matter. He's British, so that added a different flair to us that we didn't have, because most of like Mike Payton's from New York, I'm from New Jersey, Dan's from New Jersey, and then later people like Gibby's from New Jersey. Like most of the people were brought from New Jersey, but I think it's interesting to note that on this first episode we didn't have Gibby. And I introduce almost every Dace Man Show, and joining me as always, Gibby. He didn't always join me, which is crazy to think about because he missed the first two. He didn't show up until episode 3, I believe, entitled You're Sounding Kind of T-Painy. And it was Dan. Dan was in that original role. He was to play the Ed McMahon to my Johnny Carson, the Andy Richter to my Conan. I don't know if anyone else has sidekicks. They probably do, but those are the ones that I watched. John Baptiste, Colbert, but John Baptiste actually plays music, and none of my friends are musically talented, so that's unfair to John Baptiste. But I didn't have a partner yet. So the first episode was a little rocky, mainly because you ran into a weird flow. Everybody who had been on the show that had worked together before worked on the wrestling shows. And at least I had never been led by me in a conversation. I never hosted any of the wrestling stuff. I didn't host I Got Gameplay. I brought the content. I directed the conversation. I was experiencing a whole new flow in a city I had never been in, an hour behind where I was supposed to be, and all honesty, no prep time. If I had been home the week of the first episode, it may have been better. It may have been longer than 45 minutes. And it does get better as time goes on. It does dip as time goes on as well, and I think we're back on an upswing, and we'll talk more about those type of things later on in a Dacetacular Mind. But for the first episode, we talked about the Maximum 100. So that's a list that's released every year by Maximum of the hottest females, celebrity females. The number one hottest was Miley Cyrus that year, and that was after she had, I believe, broken up with Mr. Hemsworth, and Wrecking Ball was a big thing at the time. And I remember we pretty much ran through that list after talking about a couple other stories, but the dominating conversation of that was that list and going, what? Huh? What? Really? Oh yeah, that makes sense. And that was the first episode. And by no means did we have our footing on that first episode. And like I said, a lot of those people, well, none of those people are on the show today. And the show today is myself, Gibby, and we're being produced by Frank. Frank Ward wouldn't come in until episode 11. Gibby was there at episode 3. And Michael Burhan lasted, I want to say he lasted about 2 or 3 years. I think he dropped off around episode in the 40s or 50s. He came back every once in a while, and ultimately what we did is we rotated the cast as well. I mean, we have so many people. If you ever go to basementprotocolproductions.com, you'll see the entire list of alumni who have passed through the Dace Man Show at one point or another. And it's that first episode is so critical, but at the same time so weird because it's not what we ended up being. It's not who we were. It's actually the definition of a pilot, if you think about it, because in the end, we revamped. Not saying that Mike Payton was bad, not saying that Dan Ralph was bad, not saying that Michael Burhan was bad. We adapted with the time. So we ran Blog Talk Radio for a while until we made the jump to Twitch, because Blog Talk was giving us some problems. And Twitch, we felt that we had better chemistry in person where we could look at each other and not overrun each other when talking. On Blog Talk, you're all on Skype, you're not looking at each other, and you kind of run over each other. So we'll get more into that when we break down the Dace Man Show in its current iteration, but there are your origins. That is the origins of the Dace Man Show, the origins of the Dace Man, the word Dacetacular. All that was covered in today's episode. From 2006 to the fateful day, June 23rd, 2013, when the Dace Man Show took off and it became what it is today, into a franchise that's now owned by a production company, Basement Protocol Productions. So, like, the whole morphing of that is a decade. And even before that, it was still 7 years. So, this idea was like 15 years old. It started in 2006, where I was a newscaster, coined the Dace Man off of a Andrew Dice Clay type play of words, by a teacher, using the word Dacetacular that was coined by one of my friends in his response to how he was doing. And to now, where I do the Dace Man Show on Tuesdays, I do a Dacetacular Mind, where I get to talk to you about how I feel about certain topics or retrospective on things that I've done, and streaming with the Dace Man Plays. So a whole franchise was born out of a high school idea. Probably, we'll give it the year, but the year 2006, where I did morning announcements and I had a friend say a word that would forever be ingrained into everything I do going forward. And that's who I am. Well, that's a character I play and has been a big part of my life. Which, if you listen to the first episode, finding that balance and finding that line of when to be that guy and when not to be that guy had been a very gray and difficult area for some time. I feel like I've distinguished that now by doing this podcast and keeping that show on Tuesdays. And I enjoy it. So there you have it, folks. The origin of the Dace Man Show. A lot more complicated than what you think. Or cared. More importantly, a lot more complicated than you cared about. Because a lot of people probably just thought, oh, in 2013 you started a podcast like the rest of the world. Now, this is the third attempt, the most successful attempt, but still the third attempt at what an idea was. Had I gotten traction on it at the times that I initially tried them, could have been the big thing that's out there right now. I could have been, was it DeFranco? Is that his name? Or Jenna Marbles? Nah, I couldn't be Jenna Marbles. I'm not that hot. But if I had figured out how to internet properly, we could be having a different talk today. But nonetheless, I enjoyed having this talk today. I enjoyed the journey that has gotten to me where I am today when it comes to all this Dace Man Show shtick. I don't know what we're going to talk about next week. I haven't thought that far in advance. I don't know if I'm going to record it today. I might wait another 2 weeks and give myself some time to let something piss me off. But I do know a lot of topics that could come in the future. I will talk about uncensored comedy at some point. I'm going to talk about my time at Fanboys Anonymous. I enjoyed that time. That time opened up a lot of doors for me, as well as the Dace Man Show itself. Like, the Dace Man Show didn't get its third iteration without Fanboys Anonymous and Mega Powered Radio. I want to talk about both. I want to talk about, like I said, uncensored comedy. I want to talk about the time that I was down in Savannah, Georgia. That was 9 months of my life that I didn't live in New Jersey. Weird to think. And so much more. I have opinions galore. Whether you guys listen to them or not is up to you. But I hope you're taking the journey with me. And if you are, I thank you. And you just got, in a cheesy way, a glimpse into a Dacetacular Mind. Thanks for hanging out, guys.